This is another podcast from Alpha Business Media.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into something really vital, especially for farmers in Nepal, this whole issue of post-harvest losses.
Yeah, it's a topic with huge implications. We've got some great source material here, studies, reports, real stories.
And they really lay out the scale of the problem, but also, importantly, some practical solutions.
It's pretty stark, isn't it? The numbers suggest, up to 30%, sometimes even more of a harvest just gone.
30%, think about that. All the effort, the resources, just lost between the field and getting it sold or eaten.
Uh-huh. The sources mention these heartbreaking stories, like farmers in places like Dhading and Chitwan.
Dumping tomatoes, cabbage.
Exactly. Because they couldn't sell it profitably. Just devastating.
It really is. But what I found interesting in the material is the shift in perspective. It's not presented as just, unavoidable bad luck.
Right. It frames it more like a business challenge, a solvable one, using methods that are actually accessible, low-cost stuff, sometimes modern, sometimes drawing on really traditional knowledge.
And it seems to boil down to strengthening the whole farm operation, really across 4 key areas.
Yeah, the source is sort of structured that way, like pillars. First, getting the foundation right, starting with the soil itself.
Then controlling your timing, smart storage, basically.
Then adding value, processing what you grow instead of losing it.
And finally, the market piece working together for more power.
Exactly. So for you listening, this deep dive is all about pulling out those key insights, the practical takeaways from this material.
Let's dive in.
Okay, let's start where the sources start. Right there in the ground, building that strong foundation in the soil.
That's really the core idea, isn't it? That tackling these losses actually begins before the harvest.
That's so.
Well, a healthier plant grown in really fertile soil is just naturally stronger, more resilient.
So the produce itself is less likely to get damaged and maybe stores better.
Precisely. It holds its quality longer. It's less about damage control after things go wrong and more about, proactively growing something robust from the start.
Building in that quality.
Yeah.
And the sources really emphasize organic methods for achieving that soil health.
They do. It's not just about avoiding chemicals, though that's part of it. It's about building the soil's long-term health, its structure, water retention, providing balanced nutrients.
Healthier soil, stronger plants, better keeping quality. Makes sense.
And one key technique that comes up is vermicomposting.
Right. Using earthworms, what's the process there?
It's actually quite straightforward. You use specific types of worms, like Eisenia fetida, sometimes called stinky worms, because they like that decomposing environment.
Okay.
And they break down organic waste animal manure, crop leftovers, even kitchen scraps into this really rich compost.
And manure is something many Nepalese farmers would have readily available if they keep livestock.
Absolutely. It's a key resource. They set up a bin or a pit, add the waste, add the worms, keep it moist, and the worms do the heavy lifting.
What are the big advantages the source points out?
Well, first, it's fantastic fertilizer. But crucially, it cuts down the need for chemical fertilizers.
Which is a big deal in Nepal, given the reliance on imports.
A huge deal. The supply chain for chemicals is often unreliable. Prices fluctuate wildly. Availability can be an issue right when you need it.
And the subsidies don't always work out.
Right. Plus, concerns about quality, unofficial imports. Vermicomposting just bypasses all that uncertainty.
So more independence.
Definitely. And it improves the soil structure long-term, reduces waste pollution. And interestingly, the worms themselves become feed for chickens or fish, another cost saving.
The source mentioned training programs, like for women farmers in Chigunarina.
Yes, demonstrating it's practical and can be taught effectively. It creates a more circular, self-reliant system on the farm.
And it sits alongside traditional composting too, right? The old heap or pit methods are still valuable.
Absolutely. Those are still fundamental practices.
Okay, moving to another fascinating local solution mentioned, Chaholmal. Sounds intriguing.
It really is a clever homemade brew. Basically, it's a liquid biofertilizer and a biopesticide that farmers make themselves.
Using local ingredients.
Exactly. Readily available stuff. The key is its strong, pungent smell. That's what helps repel pests.
And it helps the plants too.
Yes, it provides nutrients and beneficial microbes that boost plant health and can protect against some diseases.
The recipe seemed pretty simple in the source material.
It is. Water, animal urine, cow or buffalo usually for the NPK, some fresh manure or forest soil as a kind of microbial starter.
Like a leaven.
Kind of, yeah. And then chopped leaves or twigs from strong-smelling plants like wormwood, neem, adathoda, things pests don't like.
Let it ferment, Then dilute.
Correct. Ferment for a few weeks, stir it now and then dilute with water. The source suggests maybe 1 part jehol to 7 parts water for young plants, 1 to 4 for older ones, and use it for watering or spraying.
And the economics are compelling. That Cov district study,
Yeah.
farmers spending, what, ours $23,000 a year on chemicals?
Around that, yeah. Jehol can pretty much eliminate that cost.
And wasn't there data showing it might even increase yield compared to chemicals in some cases, like with rice?
That's what some of the experimental data suggests. So it's not just cheaper, it could actually be more effective. Quite powerful.
Really powerful. Okay, let's touch on the other soil builders. Green manure and crop rotation.
Right. These are really foundational, sustainable farming practices. Green manures are crops you grow specifically to benefit the soil.
Not for harvesting the crop itself.
No, you plow them back into the soil while they're still green or just starting to flower.
And what do they do for the soil?
They suppress weeds just by growing densely. Their roots help loosen compacted soil, improving the structure and how well water soaks in. Some, like mustard, can even help manage certain pests or diseases.
And legumes are special.
Very special. Things like clover, vetch, cowpeas, sesbania. They have this amazing ability to work with bacteria in the soil to pull nitrogen right out of the air.
Free fertilizer, essentially.
Pretty much. The source gives examples like using sesbania with rice or maize in Nepal, or rotating with legumes like lentils or peas.
Which leads right into crop rotation.
Which is, well, not planting the same thing in the same spot year after year.
Why is that so important?
Because different crops use different nutrients and attract different pests and diseases. If you plant the same crop over and over, you deplete specific nutrients and let its specific enemies build up in the soil.
Rotation breaks that cycle.
Exactly. It maintains fertility better and keeps pests and diseases more naturally in check.
The sources mention common rotations like rice wheat, rice legumes.
Yes, and also more intensive, potentially more profitable ones like rice vegetables. Even in the hills, where the growing season might be shorter, they practice rotations over, say, 2 years with crops like potatoes, buckwheat, beans.
So all these soil health strategies, composting, geomal, green manures, rotation, they really work together.
They do. They build that inherent strength and resilience in the plant and, crucially, reduce that dependence on the external chemical supply chain, which, as we said, can be expensive and unreliable.
It's an economic strategy as much as an agricultural one, building independence.
That's a great way to put it. The sources consistently show these are low-cost inputs with really high returns for the farm's long-term health and the farmer's bottom line.
Okay, so you've done the work in the field, the soil is healthy, the plants are strong, you've got a good harvest. But, as the sources stress, that's only half the battle. Now you need to protect it.
Right. This brings us to that second pillar, controlling your time with smart storage. This is where huge losses can happen, poor handling, no place to store things properly.
It forces farmers into selling immediately, right? During that peak harvest glut.
Exactly. Supply skyrockets, prices plummet. The source mentions ginger. If you can't store it properly, tubers get soiled, value is lost, farmers become price takers.
They have no power to wait for better prices.
None at all. So simple, affordable storage isn't just about stopping rot, it's about gaining market leverage.
What kinds of storage solutions do the sources highlight?
Well, there are traditional methods like cellar stores. These are common in the hilly areas of Nepal.
Underground or semi-underground?
Yes, using the natural coolness and humidity of the earth. Great for things like potatoes, cabbage, but also fruits like apples and tangerines.
And the benefit is significant extension of shelf life.
Massive. The source says tangerines can last up to 3 months, apples maybe even 6 months. That allows farmers to hold on to them and sell when demand and prices pick up later in the year.
That completely changes the game. Then there's the zero-energy cool chamber.
Yeah.
Sounds very practical.
It's a fantastic piece of low-cost tech, needs no electricity. Basically, it's a double-walled brick structure.
With sand in between.
Yep, you fill the gap with sand and keep that sand damp.
And the evaporation cools the inside.
That's the principle, evaporative cooling. It lowers the temperature inside the chamber, maybe 10 to 15 degrees Celsius cooler than outside, the source says, and keeps the humidity really high, or around 90%.
Perfect for keeping fruits and vegetables fresh for longer.
Ideal for short-term storage, yeah. Preserves that just picked quality.
And for grains. To protect against insects and mold, hermetic bags come up.
Right. These are airtight bags, often multi-layered PICS bags are a well-known example, designed for storing dry greens like corn, beans, rice.
Airtight is the key feature.
Absolutely. It cuts off the oxygen supply, so any insects sealed inside quickly die. It also keeps moisture out, preventing mold growth, all without needing chemical insecticides.
Simple, but effective. Now, the sources also really emphasize that storage starts before the structure with handling.
Critically important. Every little bruise or scratch on a fruit or vegetable is an open door for spoilage organisms. Careful handling from the moment of picking is vital.
And containers matter. The comparison between the traditional doko baskets and plastic crates was striking.
It really highlights the issue. The doko, while traditional, can be rough, rigid. Produce gets piled in, leading to damage.
Whereas plastic crates are smooth.
Smooth, durable, washable, and crucially, stackable. Stacking distributes the weight properly, protecting the produce at the bottom. It seems like a small change, but it preserves quality significantly.
And that quality translates to better prices.
Pays for itself, the source argues. And for farmer groups, the idea of a packhouse operation is mentioned.
Does that have to be fancy, right? Just a clean space.
Exactly. A shaded, clean area is enough to start. The key activities are washing, sorting, which is crucial, and packing properly.
Why is sorting so important?
Because you can separate your premium quality produce, which can fetch top prices in demanding markets, from slightly lower grades that might be better for local sale or, importantly, for processing.
So groups can offer consistent, graded batches that buyers prefer.
Precisely. Taken together, these storage and handling methods give farmers control. They move from being forced sellers in a buyer's market to having the strategic option to store and sell when the timing and price are right. Small investments yielding significant market power.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so you've grown it well, stored it smart, but what about the stuff that isn't grade A for the fresh market, or just the sheer volume during peak harvest? This brings us to pillar 3, adding value through processing.
Yes, turning potential waste or low-value surplus into profitable products. This is where farmers can really step into being entrepreneurs. And Nepal has this incredibly rich tradition of food preservation to build on.
You mean things like gundruk and sinki?
Exactly. The sources highlight these traditional fermented and dried products, gundruk from leafy greens, sinki from radish roots.
Anaerobic fermentation, then drying.
Right. Preserves them for months, gives them unique flavors. And there's huge demand, both in Nepal and for export to the diaspora. They're staples.
So a built-in market.
Definitely. And there are other dried products, too, like sandana-dried radish slices or maziora, those lentil and vegetable balls. Easy to store, easy to transport, sell later.
But traditional sun drying has drawbacks, contamination risk, weather dependency.
Which is where solar dryers come in as a great improvement. The source mentions simple, low-cost designs developed by NRRs, the Agricultural Research Council.
Made from local materials.
Yeah, often just wood or bamboo frames covered with UV-stabilized plastic sheeting. They create a clean, protected environment.
So drying is faster, more hygienic.
Yes, better quality product overall. These smaller dryers are great for individual farms, making things like apple chips, fruit leathers from lapside, drying vegetables.
And there are larger versions, too, for groups.
The walk-in solar dryer or tunnel dryer, bigger structures, maybe bamboo and plastic that can handle larger volumes up to 200 kilograms at a time, the source suggests. Ideal for cooperatives drying things like mushrooms, spices, ginger, cardamom coffee, larger fruit batches.
Ginger is used as a key example of value addition through drying.
It's a perfect case study. Nepal exports a lot of fresh ginger, often at low prices, mainly to India. Just drying it into sucho makes a huge difference.
Higher value, longer shelf life.
Absolutely. It opens up better export markets. And using a solar dryer ensures that sucho is clean and high quality, which those markets demand.
And processing doesn't always need complex machinery, right? The sources say simple things like pickles, juices, jams can start small scale.
That's right. Basic kitchen equipment is often enough to get started, maybe a simple hand crank tool for coffee pulping or a basic ginger washer, but you don't need a factory setup initially.
What kinds of simple products are mentioned?
Well, pickles achar are hugely popular locally, made from mango, lemon, radish, cauliflower, lots of possibilities. Then jams, jellies, juices, squashes from fruits like apples, plums, kiwis, oranges.
Things with a good shelf life.
Exactly. The source points to existing successes, like kiwi processing into juice or wine, or apple juice production in areas like Calicut.
So what's the overarching strategic benefit here? Taking that surplus or lower grade produce and processing it.
It's all about diversifying risk. Think about it. If you're just a tomato farmer selling fresh, you're totally exposed to the volatile, fresh tomato market.
Right.
But if you also make tomato achar, dried tomatoes, maybe tomato juice, Suddenly you have multiple products, multiple markets, different shelf lives, different price points. You're not reliant on just one thing.
It's like building a portfolio for the farm.
Precisely. It creates more stable, resilient income streams. It turns a potential loss into multiple potential gains.
The range of possibilities highlighted in the source material is really impressive. So much potential there. Okay, we've covered soil, storage, processing. The final piece of the puzzle, according to the sources, is actually getting that product to market effectively and profitably. And this is where individual farmers often really struggle, especially with middlemen.
Yeah, this is a huge point of frustration. The sources talk about this massive gap between the price the farmer gets at the farm gate
Yeah.
and what you, the consumer, end up paying.
How big is that gap?
Studies mentioned suggest the farmer might only receive something like 42 to 57% of the final retail price. Less than half sometimes.
Wow. Where does the rest go?
It gets absorbed along the supply chain. The sources describe this often long, multi-layered system, could be up to 7 intermediaries. Local collectors, transporters, wholesalers, distributors, retailers.
Each taking a cut.
Each taking a markup, often with much less risk than the farmer took growing the crop in the first place.
And the individual small farmer just doesn't have much power in that system.
Very little. They usually lack their own transport, goods storage, real-time market information, and crucially, bargaining power. They're often stuck taking the price offered by the first buyer who shows up.
And lack of regulation or wholesale monopolies don't help.
Exactly. Places like the Kalamati market in Kathmandu are mentioned as having significant wholesale control, which can further disadvantage farmers.
So faced with this system, what's the recommended solution in the source material?
The most strongly emphasized and proven approach is farmers working together through agricultural cooperatives.
And the government supports this.
Yes, the source notes active government backing for the cooperative movement in Nepal. They see the potential.
How exactly do cooperatives help farmers break through those barriers?
Several ways. First, collective marketing. By pooling their produce, they create larger, more attractive volumes for buyers. This gives them actual bargaining power.
They can negotiate better prices.
Reports cited suggest 10–20% higher prices, which is significant. Second, cost reduction. Sharing transport costs is much cheaper, and selling collectively cuts out layers of intermediary commissions.
Makes sense.
Third, they can invest in market infrastructure, setting up collection centers where produce can be properly aggregated, sorted, graded, packed. Some even open their own retail shops or create direct links, like that Kisan Kopoko model mentioned.
Bypassing the traditional chain altogether.
Effectively, yes. And fourth, access to resources and finance. Cooperatives can buy inputs like seeds or fertilizer in bulk, getting better prices and quality control. They can also often provide loans to members on better terms than they might find elsewhere.
The source shares some really inspiring success stories.
Absolutely. Like Panchakanya, a women-led cooperative that boosted income via organic farming and even set up its own seed supply and microcredit. Or Janagarathi, where vegetable and fruit farmers earn significantly more per kilo through the co-op better price, 0 extra costs.
And the dairy cooperative example.
Sri Kamalamai, another women's cooperative. They started small, partnered strategically with Heifer International and Sujal Dairy, secured a stable market, finance, technical help. Milk collection apparently jumped from 500 to 1,300 liters a day, providing stable income for hundreds. It shows the transformative power.
Beyond cooperatives are other models discussed, like contract farming.
Yes, that's mentioned as another mechanism. This is where a farmer agrees before planting to supply a certain amount of produce to a specific buyer, like a processing company or exporter, at a preset price.
The benefit being a guaranteed market and price.
Exactly. It removes the price uncertainty. Often, the buyer might provide inputs on credit or technical support, too. Studies mentioned in the source for things like seed rice or ginger in Nepal showed contract farmers earned considerably more, 23 to 58% higher profits.
But there are downsides.
There can be. The source flags potential risks. Farmers might lose some independence as they have to meet the buyer's specs. There's potential for exploitation by the more powerful company, and if the crop fails, the farmer could be stuck with debt for the inputs. Plus, the legal framework is still evolving in Nepal.
So farmer protection is key. And what about technology? Digital platforms, ICT?
Huge potential there, for sure. Getting access to weather info, real-time market prices, expert advice, even diagnosing problems using apps like Krishi Bazaar or GeoKrishi, it could be transformative.
But There are big hurdles in the Nepalese context.
Significant ones. Digital literacy is a major barrier. The source quotes over 45% rural illiteracy. Makes using apps tough. Then there's limited and costly internet access. In many rural areas, maybe only 39% nationally have access.
And the apps themselves aren't always suitable.
Often not designed with the user's reality in mind. Lack of things like voice control for low literacy users, or offline functionality for areas with spotty internet. These limit uptake. So, while technology has promise, the cooperative model really stands out in the source material as the most impactful, established way farmers are currently overcoming these market challenges.
Right.
They build this parallel, fairer system.
They shorten that chain from farmer to consumer.
Keep more of the value within the community, provide essential services. It's really an integrated hub.
The comparison tables in the source really drive home the advantages of cooperative marketing versus going it alone. Price, costs, access, power. It's quite clear.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. We started with that stark figure up to 30% loss, a huge drain.
And we've walked through this framework from the source material built on those 4 key strategic pillars.
Pillar 1, building that strong foundation in the soil. Organic methods, vermicomposting, that clever J-homal, green manures, crop rotation.
Pillar 2, controlling your time with smart, low-cost storage. Cellars, zero-energy cool chambers, hermetic bags, plus that vital, careful handling.
Pillar 3, creating value, not waste. Traditional preservation like gundruk, simple processing like pickles and jams, using efficient solar dryers.
And Pillar 4, uniting for strength, leveraging the power of cooperatives for better marketing, lower costs, and access to resources.
It's really presented as a holistic approach, isn't it? These aren't just separate tricks.
Absolutely. They work together to build farms that are more sustainable, more resilient, more profitable. It strengthens food security for Nepal, reduces reliance on imports.
And fosters a fairer, more environmentally conscious agricultural sector.
The message from the source material seems clear for you listening. The tools, the knowledge, much of it is already there, accessible.
Yeah, the potential to tackle these losses is real.
And the path forward, as suggested by these sources, isn't just about waiting for some big external technological fix. It's really about harnessing local innovation, respecting and using traditional wisdom, and leveraging the incredible power of community and collective action.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Beyond just farming in Nepal, how those core principles, using local resources, valuing existing knowledge, working together, might apply to other challenges, other contexts you might be facing, finding strength in what's already there.
A very powerful message to end on.
That wraps up this deep dive. We really hope you found these insights into tackling post-harvest losses valuable and practical.